Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
When shopping for your family's meals, do you know where you can find Alaska-grown products? Everywhere. They're available at your local grocery stores and farmers markets across the state. Alaska-grown products are fresher and more nutritious, and buying local helps grow our economy. So just look for the Alaska-grown label when you shop, or ask your grocer where the Alaska-grown products are. Remember, Alaska-grown. It's closer, fresher, better.
And it's all Alaska-grown.
The National Weather Service.
Good day, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Once again, we welcome you to Alaska Weather. You can always get your latest weather information at weather.gov/Alaska, and anytime you have a question about the weather or the websites that you're using to find our forecast now across Alaska, email me at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. Here's a look at what we're seeing across the region now in the Tanana Valley. We're still watching for minor flood concerns. A flood advisory is posted. That'll continue to remain hoisted until the flooding has abated. And look for those conditions to slowly recede. However, we are adding more rainfall to the weather picture, though. So we're still watching very carefully the level of water there around the Tanana Valley and around the Chena as well. So keep that in mind. And if you're in the immediate Fairbanks region, North Pole or west and north, again, the common sense flooding rules always apply, but it's always that common sense that seems to get left on the side of the road. Never cross flooded roadways. Turn around, don't drown is a saying. Remember that, teach it to your kids, and I promise you they will remind you when you need it the most. So tell your kids, turn around, don't drown. Here's fire danger right now, and with the latest amount of rainfall that we've seen across a large part of the region, gone are even elevated fire concerns for South Central, the Copper River Basin, Southwest. We have one little drier patch there across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula, but conditions have eased up as far as drier conditions go for most of the region, and for many that should at least stay the case for at least the next week or so. So good news there. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and you can tell we're getting later and later into summer as we're losing parts of the visible satellite picture scan. The 24-hour daylight, of course, is gone now. As you look at southeast, you can see very dry weather is still sitting right on top of the archipelago. Across the Gulf, clouds have taken over and all the way to the west. A huge swath of moisture is present across southwestern Alaska, the central and eastern chain, all the way up into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and north of the Alaska Range, into the middle Tanana Valley and northward into the upper Yukon. Things start to break up a little bit, but even some of that cloud cover has made its way up toward Arctic Village. North and west of that, conditions are considerably drier. Not necessarily cooler, but certainly drier there. This wealth of moisture is being reinforced. Wave after wave after wave is working along in this general south and westerly wind. And with that tropical moisture and warm air that's moving in, it's going to rain, and it's going to be a persistent rain for a day or so, and then you might get a little bit of a break, and then another round of rain will move in, and then another round of rain will move in. And that's going to be the story for the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, all the way up into the central and eastern interior. In fact, many in southeast are going to get a little bit of a break, at least for the next day or two. There may be a considerably drier days for you, while the rest of Alaska, at least the lower two-thirds anyway, is looking at fairly wet weather. Here's the infrared satellite picture, and you can see the drier weather across the north slope. Areas of fog should be expected across the Chukchi Sea and the Beaufort Sea as high pressure is in charge there right now. That is adding some drier and more clear weather across some parts of the north slope communities. However, that is locking in that low-level stratus layer very close to the ocean, and because of that and close to the coast, I wouldn't be surprised to see poor visibility on and off there, especially as that ridge remains in charge into the weekend. Not across the west, the brighter white colors you notice there are cooler cloud tops, and that, under that is probably a better chance of rainfall. You can see those moving through the Bering Sea and wrapping around low pressure, the center of which is now north of Unalaska and heading toward the southwestern coast. but it's just one of many. There is considerably more weather disturbances back to the west. So plan on wet weather anywhere south of the Alaska Range and southwest. And again, it's going to come in waves as we go into the weekend and well into next week. Here's a look at the surface chart. High pressure means dry weather up north for right now at 1,029 millibars. You can see some areas of clouds across the eastern Brooks Range and the Beaufort Seacoast. South of that, pockets of rainfall all the way from the Alaska Range to Bristol Bay, down through Cold Bay and into Sand Point and Kodiak Island. Warmer air lifting northward, adding that gentle push that helps keep steadier rainfall in place. Showers behind cold fronts there, and then we're back into slightly cooler air for Adak and Atka. Meanwhile, on the eastern side of a ridge of high pressure, it's relatively dry weather, maybe not completely dry in all parts of southeast, but generally speaking, drier compared to most in Alaska today. Tonight's forecast shows low pressure working up the western end of Cook Inlet. It looks like rain will continue tonight and into tomorrow for many places up and down the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, the Copper River Basin, all the way up to Matanuska and Susitna Valleys, and out across the west with that general southwest flow still in charge. Southeast, things look, again, generally dry. A partly to mostly cloudy sky for many there with high pressure across the Beaufort Seacoast. A little bit stronger tonight as you would expect, and areas of fog should develop. Low pressure out across the central Bering will run just underneath a ridge of high pressure south and west of the Gulf of Anadyr. And behind that is the next wave of rainfall that scoots eastward. You can see the warm front working its way into the Aleutians already by Friday. Any colder air that is working its way through this system will fall apart and just kind of get mixed up. But the disturbance that is generating the rainfall and the lift needed to build the clouds will still be there. So just because we're indicating this is breaking up there and the warmer air is breaking up and mixing up, doesn't mean the rain's going to stop. In fact, it looks like that rainfall will spread even further north as we get into Friday for parts of the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and into the middle Yukon Valley. Expect some steady rainfall there, and there could be some amounts in southwest, south central, and the east part of the interior that could easily add up to over an inch or so as we head through the weekend. High pressure is still in charge of the Gulf, and you can see that it is driving that southwesterly flow into the interior and bringing that warm and wet air northward, but it's also still protecting a good part of southeast, so it's limiting the amount of cloud cover and a lot of the moisture that could otherwise just work its way right across the Gulf of Alaska as we see sometimes in the winter. So in this case, the weather's moving from south to north and then breaking up, at least mostly, before it gets into southeastern Alaska. There may still be some wet spots from time to time. As we get into Saturday, you can see some moisture is trying to work its way around the Gulf into the outer coast there, probably from Sitka northward toward Yakutat and back toward Prince William Sound. But by and large, the bulk of the precipitation is still across southwest, south central, the west coast, and it's spreading a little bit further northward again into places almost toward Wainwright there as you get out toward Point Hope, Point Lay, and low pressure sitting just west of Nunivak Island. Hasn't changed much. This should be a very similar story for Sunday as well. 997 millibar low there near Nunivak Island. Part of that system is lingering across the Aleutians at a little bit over 1,000 millibars. And again, there are several more disturbances in this chain of events, so looks like wet weather is going to be upon us there well into next week. Here is the temperature forecast, or temperature actual readings there we saw at 3 o'clock, I should say. 50s and 60s for most of southeast, and you'll notice a big difference again with temperatures there in the lower to mid 60s for the Panhandle compared to places where it's raining, where we're in the upper 50s and lower 60s. So that lack of sunshine and certainly a cloud cover does make a pretty big difference. Around the capital city, close to 60 today, 63 in Sitka. Ketchikan, Annette, Petersburg, Hyder, all in the low to mid 60s throughout the day. Cordova showed 57 earlier today, 57 around Portage, and 56 for Homer and Seward. Homer was closer to 61, Kenai 59. Anchorage around 61 degrees today, Talkeetna 57 degrees. Around Golcana, temps were a little bit shy of 60 at 3 o'clock, 73 in Northway. One of the warmer spots in the entire state today, 68 in Eagle, 69 for Fairbanks there. Also looking at rainfall today, 59 degrees in Fort Yukon. And northward we saw 40s and 50s around the Brooks Range. Around Anaktuvuk Pass it was 48. As you get out toward Akasuk, temperatures were closer to the mid-40s there, 40 around Barrow, and only 30s for Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, and Kaktovik there. Temperatures in Kaktovik only 36. 50 was the temperature there around the Chukchi Seacoast as you head down toward from Wainwright and into the Kotzebue Sound region. Temperatures warm back up into the mid to upper 50s, even lower 60s there around Kotzebue today. 63 in Nome. It was 50 around St. Lawrence Island. And for most of the YK Delta, you can see temps were hovering anywhere from the upper 50s to lower 60s into Norton Sound. Places around just east of Nome and then into the interior and up the Yukon Valley are probably running in the lower to mid 60s. So this is probably another warm spot earlier today if you're out there picking berries there, or perhaps working on the fish a little bit more. 59 in Bethel, not too bad for you today, but certainly a wet day. 50s and 60s for many in Southwest. And for the Pribilofs, lower to mid 50s there, 50s and 60s for a good chunk of the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint showed 57. Unalaska and Dutch Harbor 56, and low to mid 50s for most of the west and central Aleutians there. So certainly wet if you're out there trying to get some of those berries. Here's a look at temperatures tonight, and apologies that our color map there that helps you pick out some of the cold and warm spots isn't working right now. But we're working to get that fixed, so a prettier picture hopefully by tomorrow. Lower to mid 50s for many in southeast. Across south central, overnight lows in the 40s to 50s there for the interior. Expect lows back in the mid 50s for the Arctic coast. Back in the 30s for you, including Barrow at 34. Around Kotzebue Sound, expect overnight lows in the 40s to mid 50s there around Shishmaref, Nome 51, Unalakleet 54, Galena closer to 54 degrees. And southwest, we're looking at temperatures in the lower to mid 50s there, as well as Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and the Alaska Peninsula. St. Paul looking at a low of 50 tonight. For south central tomorrow, look for highs in the lower 60s with rainfall there. It's not going to be terribly warm, and it will be another gray day. Mid to upper 60s for most of southeast. You will see some sunshine, so enjoy that while it lasts. Fairbanks looking at temps from the mid 60s to about 70. The Arctic coast in the 40s to mid 50s there around Wainwright. Should be some of the warmer temperatures up north. 50s and 60s in Kotzebue Sound. Kotzebue itself in the lower 60s. 59 in Nome. The west coast looking at highs in the lower to mid 60s there. You might see a little bit of sunshine. And upper 50s for many across the Alaska Peninsula. 54 in St. Paul. On the flying weather now, we see IFR conditions, of course, in the morning, and anywhere it's raining, expect poor visibility. Look for IFR stretching into the many areas across southwestern Alaska and into Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound, and out across the eastern Aleutians. The western chain socked in, and anywhere east of Point Barrow, pretty much the Beaufort Seacoast, looking at morning starts at IFR. That should improve a little bit to MVFR throughout the day. MVFR stretching into Kotzebue Sound and then all the way into the middle Yukon Valley. A good chunk of the Susitna Valley will see IFR conditions throughout the afternoon. Look for IFR from Prince William Sound eastward to almost Yakutat. And MVFR lingers across the outer coast for southeast, but most of southeast is going to be looking at VFR and pretty good weather conditions for flying tomorrow. IFR conditions stretch south of the Bering Strait all the way through Nunivak Island and into the Alaska Peninsula there throughout the afternoon. Out west, another round of rain means more IFR for places west of Adak all the way out toward Kiska and Attu. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass are expected to be VFR tomorrow, so things look pretty good up north. Once you move south of that, though, conditions change pretty quick. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to lean over toward IFR conditions throughout the day thanks to rain. Rainy Pass will be rainy. MVFR conditions there at least. Don't be surprised if you see that dip to IFR. Windy Pass, MVFR conditions are expected. For Isabel Pass, we also expect marginal conditions throughout the day as we do in Mentasta Pass. And for Tanita Pass, similar conditions there. Rain is expected, MVFR. And Portage Pass, at least IFR, maybe some improvement during the day to MVFR. We'll have to see about that. Plan for IFR. Chilkoot and White Pass, hey, that looks like a good day to fly. Up around Haines and Skagway should be A-OK. A break in the rain. Now on to freezing levels. That cold air is dropping west of low pressure, and because of that, levels have gone below 6,000 feet west of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs. Elsewhere, though, things are warming up. Levels are rising, and because of that, it is you got to go pretty high up there to find any really sizable chunks of icing potential. You'll see that here. Looks like anywhere above 10 to 12,000 feet, you could run into some occasional moderate icing. There is plenty of lift out there. The trouble is that this is also very warm and wet air. So be on your guard if you're flying high, but if you're flying low, it doesn't look like there's a great deal of risk for icing potential by the afternoon there for many locations. Now onto the jet stream. This is the superhighway of weather, of course, and you can draw that map across the Arctic Ocean and see that it's blowing from west to northeast, anywhere from 55 knots or so to almost 60 in some cases. But just south of that, low pressure is wrapping in a much stronger flow off the continent, and that is guiding weather disturbances out of the West Pacific toward Alaska. And with high pressure here, we're getting that moisture nudging northward into the mainland of Alaska. So that's where all that moisture is coming from. But it is also bringing in some of that colder fall-like weather out across the west. So of course, changes for the season starting to show up here and there. And low pressure sits just north and west of the Pacific Northwest, with wind speeds moving up toward southeastern Alaska, also helping to keep things a little bit on the drier side for now. At 9,000 feet, you can see a ridge of high pressure across the Gulf of Alaska. Northwesterlies moving out and away from southeastern Alaska. Light southerly flow across the interior, very light, in fact, across Eagle, only 5 knots there. Low pressure around the Pribilofs, with winds around 20 to 30 knots here. And westerlies pretty much across the North Pacific. But the main focus for weather for most of Alaska right now is this southwesterly wind across the western Gulf. That is the big player. At 3,000 feet, similar conditions. Here's that ridge of high pressure again across the Gulf, across southeast. Northwesterlies running right down the outer coast there, parallel 20 to 40 knots. South and westerlies moving across Bristol Bay around 20 knots, all the way over the Seward Peninsula and Nome and Kotzebue about 20 knots, pretty much due south. And light westerly winds over the Aleutians about 10 to 20 there, this all at 3,000 feet. Turbulence potential, we'll be watching areas, say west of Tanana, from Galena northward toward Kotzebue Sound, below about 4,000 feet. Probably looking at a little bit of chop there, below 5,000 feet from the Capes and southwest through Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, and then around Sitka up toward Cross Sound and inside just a little bit below 4,000 feet. Don't be surprised to run into a little bit of chop as some of those winds are smoothing out across the outer coast. Let's look at your aviation forecast for this Thursday. I'll be back in just a few minutes with the rest of your marine weather and an update on the sea ice in the north. Stay tuned.
Daring Delphinus.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. Now that we're well into the summer months, this is a wonderful time to get outside with the family and gaze at the stars.
That's right, James. We always encourage our fellow stargazers to enjoy the night sky together with their families and make it a tradition. And the summer sky is rich with star patterns.
We always talk about the big constellations like Cygnus, Aquila, and Lyra. However, there's a tiny little constellation in the same part of the sky that you've probably always seen, but never knew its name or its story.
That constellation is Delphinus the Dolphin. Let's show you. Okay, we have our sky set up for just after sunset facing east. High in the sky, you can see the familiar pattern of the summer triangle. The brightest star of the group is Vega, and it's near the top of the triangle.
Then, down and to the right of Vega is the bright star Altair. And down and to the left of Vega is Deneb. These three stars will help you find Delphinus the Dolphin.
If you draw a line between Deneb and Altair, below it, almost halfway between the two stars, is a small diamond-shaped constellation made up of 5 stars. If you have trouble seeing it at first, you can use a technique known as averted vision. Simply look at Altair, and in your peripheral vision, you can see the small grouping of stars that make up Delphinus.
My favorite story of Delphinus involves a singer and poet named Arion. He was so skilled at playing the harp and had such an amazing singing voice that it made him very popular during the 7th century BC.
Arion was so popular that he had performances throughout the Mediterranean. However, one day, on his way home to Greece after a gig in southern Italy, the sailors on his ship conspired against him. They plotted to kill him and take the money he'd earned.
Well, that's not very nice.
No, it wasn't very nice. Finding himself surrounded, Arion begged the sailors to allow him to sing one last song. Fortunately for Arion, the sailors allowed this, and he performed one of the best songs of his life.
While Arion played his harp and sang, his music attracted several dolphins to the ship. They swam alongside the ship as Arion performed, and in a daring leap of faith, Arion threw himself overboard.
One of the dolphins rescued Arion and carried him all the way back to Greece, saving his life. In gratitude to the dolphin, Apollo, the god of music and poetry, placed an image of the dolphin in the sky among the stars of the Milky Way, and also placed an image of Arion's harp, Lyra, in the same region.
All right, let's see what the planets are doing right now. Okay, we have our sky set up for Monday, August 8th, just after sunset, and we finally have all the naked eye planets and the moon back in the evening sky. Starting near the horizon looking west, you'll see the dazzling planet Venus emerging from the glare of the sun.
Just above Venus, you'll see the tiny planet Mercury, and above that, the giant planet Jupiter. Mercury will be easier to spot because Jupiter and Venus, being much brighter, will help you locate dimmer Mercury between them.
Then look toward the southwest and you'll see a waxing crescent moon among the stars of Virgo the Maiden. Then if you look due south, you'll see the red planet Mars and the ringed planet Saturn among the stars of Scorpius the Scorpion. During the month of August, you'll see Mars move rather quickly toward the constellation Sagittarius the Centaur Archer.
So, there you have it. A musician, a dolphin, and a celestial gathering of all the 5 naked eye planets. Definitely a reason to keep looking up.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge here. You're looking at Barrow, Wainwright down to Point Lay, and once you get south and west of Wainwright, you're looking at open water. However, there's still enough sea ice and concentration that's higher than 80% lingering just north of Barrow to east, almost north of Prudhoe Bay, and then west, the concentration and ice increases substantially there. Now, the areas of blue are running between about 20 to 80% in concentration, but there is an awful lot of open water across many areas there in the Beaufort Seacoast. This is changing daily because of the changing winds there that we're seeing across the north coast and just offshore. And to track those changes anytime, you should head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice there. We list out the concentration, the 5-day forecast, as well as sea surface temperatures, which, if you haven't looked at those in a while, are running well above normal in many locations, especially in the west and south coast, not to mention the Arctic Ocean. Here's a look at the forecast now as we get into southeast. For tomorrow, it's Friday, southerly winds in the Lynn Canal, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Remembering the forecast for precipitation is pretty low. This might be a good day to get out and about if you can stand the seas running around 3 to 5 feet across the central and southern inner channels, 15 to 25 there from the northwest. Across the outer coast, the winds are a little bit stronger, of course, anywhere from 20 to about 30 knots, running from 6 to 7 feet south of Sitka to Craig. More of an onshore push from the southwest on the north end of the ridge, 25 knots with a 6-foot sea up around Yakutat and Icy Cape. We'll get more of a westerly onshore flow coming across Sound and south of Sitka there, about 25 knots at its strongest, 15 knots up north around Yakutat. Northerlies a little bit further south of Craig and Klawock, 30 knots with a 9-foot sea. And up around Lynn Canal, you're looking at southerlies continuing around 25 knots. Northwesterlies on the inside still holding around 25 knots with a 3 to 5-foot sea. So yes, it is going to be a little windy at times, but it's not going to be raining. So hopefully that works in your favor. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Southerlies working up the northern Gulf, anywhere from 15 to 25, 6 to 7-foot seas. They're 8-foot seas once you get on the east side of Kodiak Island. Inside of Shelikof Strait, a southwesterly flow with 7-foot seas. Those seas remain a little bit higher west of the Barren Islands as well. And then you get into lighter winds, a little bit more of a south and easterly push becoming variable as you head into the northern Cook Inlet, 2 to 4-foot seas there. Becoming more southeasterly and uniform as you head across the Kenai Peninsula as we get into Saturday. Light south and southeasterly winds anywhere from 10 to 20 knots, 7 to 10-foot seas east of Kodiak Island, 5 to 7-foot seas west of the Barrens and into the Shelikof Strait region for Saturday. For Bristol Bay, a southeasterly flow up there at 20 knots with a 3-foot sea. Otherwise, southerlies 20 to 25 across the Pacific coast and the Bering Sea coast. 8 to 9-foot seas there, 4-foot seas north of Cold Bay and the Bering Sea coast. As we get into Saturday, more of a southwesterly flow working into Bristol Bay. 6-foot seas expected in the Bering. 8 to 10-foot seas across the Pacific with a stronger 10-foot sea or higher 10-foot sea there from Castle Cape to Chignik as we get into Saturday. For the Aleutians, winds are a little bit lighter out here. Central and eastern parts of the chain looking at 15 to 20 knots from the west and northwest. 4-foot seas north of Unalaska and Nikolsky, 7 to even 6-foot seas as you head out west across the eastern and central chain. Look for more of a southeasterly flow from Kiska to Attu at the 20-knot wind with a 5-foot sea. As we get into Saturday, notice more of an easterly flow there. Southwesterlies working across Adak and Atka through the Pacific coast. More of a southerly flow from Nikolsky to Unalaska, and light and variable winds here from Adak all the way out toward Nikolsky with a smaller 3-foot seas expected for Saturday. For the west coast, northerlies coming down St. Lawrence Island, a westerly onshore push between Hooper Bay and Nunivak Island, 3-foot seas there. Southerlies inside of Cape Newingham and parts of the Kuskokwim Delta. Northerlies on the backside of low pressure here, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea, 3-foot seas around the Pribilofs with a 15-knot wind. As we get into Saturday, the easterlies continue across St. Lawrence Island. And again, this is all wrapping around low pressure here that's pushing wet weather up through the Kuskokwim Delta and inland as far as we can go, and northerlies on the back side of that. Now, southwesterlies will develop around the Pribilofs, 20 knots with a 6-foot sea on Saturday. For the North Slope, a broad easterly flow swishing across there, looking for 4 to 5-foot seas in the Beaufort and 4-foot seas for the Chukchi Sea on Friday, 20 to 25 in all areas, and similar conditions there on Saturday, slightly higher seas in the Beaufort, 7-foot seas expected with 3 to 4-foot seas from Barrow all the way down to Kotzebue Sound. That's a look at your marine forecast. Let's recap what's going on. For many, it's rain, and that'll be the case as we head into Saturday with a persistent southwesterly flow through the central and eastern Aleutians all the way into and over the Alaska Range into the middle Tanana Valley. For southeast, slightly drier weather for you, a little bit breezy at times as we just saw, with high pressure in charge of the Gulf. The southerly flow continues for Friday and into Saturday with rain persisting for many in south central and southwest. Up north, drier conditions, but showers start to creep northward into Kotzebue Sound as we head into Saturday with rain for the Seward Peninsula. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. We'll see you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.